So what I'm going to start with is the science question. So I'm going to ask Satinka. So where do you see mental and physical health really improving individual lives?
No, but it's not worth what. That's okay. I can talk like this. Do you hear me? Okay. Yes, we can see the effects, in fact, in 4 different areas: behavior, emotional state, psychiatric disorders, and social relationship. When you do sports, it requires discipline, rigor, and perseverance. And for some people who suffer especially of psychiatric disorders, for example, like depression or bipolar disorders, it's very helpful because it's like a structure for them. So the first point is that. Then when we do sports, we got the creation of certain hormones like dopamine, adrenaline, sorry for my accent, and noradrenaline, and endorphins. And it's very important to create this type of hormones because it improves our brain for motivation, mood, but also decision making and memory. And the last one, it's about teenagers. Because for teenagers, it's very interesting because when you do sports, you interact with other people. It's a social activity. But for teenagers, sometimes it's very difficult to make friends and express themselves in different ways. So it can be very helpful for them to break with isolation, but also build their self-esteem and trust in others.
And in your practice, what kind of numbers and statistics have you seen where there has been a real relation and improvement in one, let's say, physical health or mental health or vice versa between the two?
In matter of statistics, it's a bit difficult to provide a precise number, but I think almost for every patient, when I see they can do it, I suggest them to do it. Because for the reasons I just explained, it's very interesting to see the improvement of the emotional states. For example, in France, but I know it's the case in lots of parts of the world, we got a real problem with depression and anxiety. It's like, for me, and I speak for me as a psychologist, it's a real weapon against this type of disorder because, for example, you start a sport, but you're not good at it. So you're gonna practice again and again and again. And it's like an image, a mental image for them to improve themselves through sports, so through therapy.
So I'm going to go a little bit out of role here because based on what you were saying, Ebiye, I assume you started playing sports very young, right? What she was talking about in practice, right? There has to be an aspect also of feeling that, I'm not good at this. How do I overcome that? So what would you say helps either children or as an adult to overcome that feeling?
We've been extremely blessed to have played spectacle sport and to have had the experience where I've experienced the majority of what many people can on the success spectrum, from being someone that you've never heard of to being here at Paris 2024, having won championships, international accolades. And when you experience the highs of highs and the lows of lows, it helps you put all of life in perspective, particularly off the court. For myself, I've come to terms with the fact that you have to earn being good at something. There are instances in life where you will discover something and you'll have a natural affinity for it, and it will take too much effort for you to succeed. My favorite cartoon of all time is Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think it's such a fitting illustration of any hero's journey, but particularly an athlete. And one of the concepts in the show is this idea of better work. As the protagonist tries to master all the elements, there's always one element that is opposite the innate nature of the protagonist and takes a little bit more out. It takes a little bit more of a struggle. Maybe that subject in school that's a little bit more difficult and the other things for you. And having gone through that journey as an athlete, I've just accepted that there will be things in life that when I first discover them, I have to earn the right to be good at. I'm here after 10 years competing internationally and another half decade in the sport of handball and another decade of being an athlete before that. I'm finally here at my first Olympics. And knowing how long that took, there are things in life that are new to me. I'm like, okay, I got to put in, whether it's my 5-year, my 10-year, my 15-year, and just knowing how long the path of persistence, as was recently alluded to, takes on certain endeavors. I've learned not to take it personally when I'm not getting something, because I know mastery, having experienced it in at least one field, it takes time. And I know for a lot of people, not personally identifying with your failure is a concept that may be new or maybe difficult to wrap your head around. This idea that I can fail and fail and fail and fail at something and then sleep on it and fail and fail and fail and fail and sleep on it and then fail, then I'll succeed. And just knowing that that's life. And knowing that's not personal when you try something, you don't get it right, or if you try something and you miss a shot. We all have to miss our shots before we will learn the patterns and the pathways to make them consistently. Whether it's in handball, it's in basketball, whether that's in a non-sport related endeavor. And I'm fortunate that sport has been my vehicle to learn about life and to learn about how I strive as a human being physically.
There's a lot to that answer, and also what Satinka was saying, there's a lot of that about resilience, right? And it's almost, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please tell me if I'm wrong, but it's like, with that aspect of sports, you're able to actually have this, this feeling of calmness in your mental health as well. We'll talk more about that later too. I wanted to take a little turn because, I'm sure all athletes can say it's not just, you as an individual, there's a team. And so Emma, how does the role of physiotherapy extend beyond physical treatments to include mental support for athletes, especially in such a competitive, intense environment such as the Olympic Games?
So, hi everybody, you can hear my beautiful French accent, but we are in Paris for 2024 Olympic Games, so I will answer in French. This is for your dad. Alors la question, c'est comment le rôle de la kinésithérapie s'étend-il au-delà du traitement physique pour inclure le soutien mental des athlètes, donc en particulier dans un contexte de compétition comme les Jeux Olympiques, donc les athlètes d'un haut niveau qui vont performer et qui vont s'entraîner tous les jours. Voilà, c'est très dur mentalement, donc comme tu nous as témoigné aujourd'hui. Et donc c'est vrai que j'ai pu travailler donc avec des athlètes de haut niveau donc au sein de l'Institut national du sport, donc l'INSEP, en tant que kinésithérapeute, aussi au sein du CERS de Cap-Breton, qui est aussi un centre de rééducation réputé. Donc il y a beaucoup de rugbymen du top 14 qui vont se faire rééduquer là-bas. J'ai pu aussi travailler donc, dans des cabinets libéraux au terme durant des stages. Et enfin, j'ai pu travailler dans des clubs professionnels de hand. Et donc j'ai pu, à travers toutes ces expériences, voir comment fonctionne cette sphère donc autour de l'athlète de haut niveau, comment on va l'accompagner, comment on va accompagner les athlètes à performer. Donc c'est vrai que nous, à la télé, on voit surtout le jour de la performance, mais il y a toute une préparation en amont. Donc à l'INSEP, j'ai pu y être donc du coup pendant les 4 ans avant donc, cet événement. Et c'est vrai que les équipes, donc pour accompagner un athlète, il faut travailler en staff, donc on appelle ça un staff, qui devient de plus en plus grand puisqu'on est toujours à la recherche de la performance. Donc le staff s'élargit de plus en plus. Maintenant, dans le staff, on n'a pas uniquement le coach et l'athlète et le médecin. On va avoir le coach, l'athlète, le médecin, le préparateur physique. On va avoir le préparateur mental, le psychologue. On va aussi avoir des data scientists. Donc ça, c'est vraiment pour performer au niveau. On va avoir tout ce staff qui va s'élargir. Et l'important, donc moi, ce que je trouve, ce qui en ressort pour accompagner au mieux un sportif,
ça va être de vraiment avoir un staff qui a un discours commun, qui va essayer de ne pas l'athlète puisse ne pas aller dans la bonne direction, aller vite, être efficace. Donc quand on est à la recherche constante de la performance, c'est ça, c'est avoir un staff qui va être cohérent, qui va toujours communiquer. Et donc voilà, l'important c'est cette communication en équipe. Donc voilà, donc on fait ce qui est très important dans le staff médical, donc j'ai pu en faire partie. On pourra en discuter après plus longuement. Après, le second point concrètement en tant que kinésithérapeute, c'est vrai qu'on va faire passer des questionnaires de la douleur. Donc dans ces questionnaires de la douleur, on va avoir beaucoup d'items qui vont toucher. On va pouvoir savoir niveau psychologique l'athlète comment il se sent par rapport à sa blessure. Donc là, je pense par exemple au questionnaire ACL RSC Questionnaire. English time. Voilà, donc des questionnaires comme cela, on va avoir l'aspect psychologique. Donc en tant que kinésithérapeute, on va vraiment suivre ça. Et donc si besoin, on va réorienter vers un psychologue si besoin. L'athlète, on va communiquer avec lui, être empathique, être vraiment à l'écoute. Donc c'est comme ça en tant que kinésithérapeute, un bon kiné qui va pouvoir accompagner des athlètes à performer du coup dans le plus haut niveau, puisque c'est pas facile tous les jours comme on a pu nous l'expliquer. Et donc, avec tous ces outils, donc j'ai pu mener une étude. Donc, moi, je me suis intéressée aux critères de retour au sport lors de mon étude, mon mémoire de fin d'études. Je vous le passerai si vous voulez, si vous voulez le consulter. Donc, parce que la question qui revient souvent, c'est quand est-ce que je peux retourner sur le terrain. Donc, quand on est kiné, on l'entend toujours. Donc là, on a mon futur collègue Cédric Lica qui est présent à la salle. Donc, il pourra témoigner. C'est quand est-ce qu'on retourne sur le terrain. C'est la question de tous les sportifs. Et donc, en tant que kiné, donc moi, j'ai trouvé la meilleure façon d'accompagner un sportif, c'est d'être honnête avec lui. Avoir un personnel médical qui est honnête et donc pouvoir lui proposer des tests de retour au sport, c'est quelque chose qui m'a beaucoup intéressée. C'est pour ça que j'ai mon étude qui a porté sur cela, donc les tests de retour au sport. Donc sur la tendinopathie d'Achille, donc c'était chez le triple sauteur, moi, donc j'ai pu être accompagnée par Teddy Tango, Hugues Fabrice Zango aussi, pour ceux qui connaissent. Et donc voilà, les tests de retour au sport, être concret, avoir un objectif pour avoir une progression, quoi, et savoir quand est-ce que toujours avoir un objectif, même si c'est pas demain, mais savoir concrètement où est-ce qu'on en est dans la rééducation. Ça, c'est ce qui va vraiment aider, donc mentalement en tant que kinésithérapeute, les sportifs, pouvoir donner des objectifs concrets. Et après, enfin, donc un point que je voudrais aborder, le dernier point, donc ce serait être sportif. Voilà, le sport, ça va être une drogue pour beaucoup d'athlètes de haut niveau. On pourrait comparer le sport like a drugs. And donc, vu que ça va être une drogue, ils vont beaucoup s'entraîner, tout ça. Mais par contre, devenir un personnage médiatique, c'est quelque chose qui va s'apprendre au fur et à mesure. On ne devient pas un personnage médiatique comme ça. Et donc, il va y avoir beaucoup de pression médiatique autour des sportifs de haut niveau. Donc là, on voit Léon Marchand qui est passé, imaginons, de 10 000 abonnés sur Instagram à maintenant 1 million, je pense, aujourd'hui, si on check, tous les abonnés font que augmenter. Et donc c'est ça, être un personnage médiatique, ça, c'est quelque chose qui va être difficile à gérer pour un athlète. Et c'est vrai que le kiné, ça va être souvent le premier confident, donc dans le sport de haut niveau. Donc ça va être le kiné qui va être témoin souvent d'un mal-être mental, d'une pression médiatique trop forte, d'un article qui a été mal perçu. Par exemple, un journaliste va écrire un article sans vraiment forcément avoir une arrière-pensée, mais derrière l'athlète a beaucoup transpiré, donc la moindre petite remarque qui peut être à fleur de peau. Et donc c'est vrai que le kiné, donc, qui va être témoin de tout ça, et on va accompagner surtout chez des publics qui vont être très jeunes. Donc là, je pense à l'équipe de France de gymnastique, donc qui va être, la moyenne d'âge va être de 19 ans, 20 ans. Donc c'est vrai que ça peut être difficile à recevoir. Donc la presse, donc c'est vraiment, c'est pas un monde à part. Être athlète de haut niveau, c'est un package. Et donc c'est pour ça que je suis ici pour témoigner en tant que kiné et que je suis très heureuse de partager ce panel avec divers profils, parce que c'est vrai que c'est un staff, toujours une équipe, et pour que ça fonctionne bien, il faut que toute la communication, ça va être le plus important. Et donc, j'aimerais vous parler de l'article de Daniel qui nous fait l'honneur d'être présent ici, un journaliste sportif aussi chercheur, donc qui pourra intervenir. Et il a écrit un très bel article que j'ai imprimé, donc sur l'escrimeuse. Donc voilà, il pourra vous en parler, témoigner. Donc le côté journaliste, presse, voilà. On a un spécialiste qui est présent dans la salle aussi. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. So I'm not going to translate all of that, but what I want to say is, what I think is important is that, there's like a big team that's involved. It requires trust, right, between the athletes and whoever is working with them. And also, you're right, the media can be a double-sided coin, right, in this situation. Based on that, I want to, Satinka, when we're talking about when we're looking on that, right? Because we're looking at all these teams. So how do we think of the investment that has been happening in mental and physical health as it's connected? Have you seen changes from when you started EMB Sports, or even just working with people from different parts of the world?
Thank you. My vision is a bit special because I was myself an athlete years ago. It was years ago. I was a professional dancer, but I broke my back. So it was a very hard time for me. So that's why my vision is a bit different, because I got the two sides of the coin as an athlete and as a professional, a psychologist. I know that mental health nowadays it's very different compared to before, because now we understand the importance of the mental health when you do sports. Before, it was almost like a detail. You're not being well, oh, that's okay, because you're gonna make it, it's not so bad, and you have to be very proud of yourself and very secure about what you are gonna do. But no, you are first of all, you are a human being, so you got emotion, you got your state of mind, you got your own vision of what you are doing, including what you are doing in sports. So I think, yeah, it's very important to consider that change is coming for mental health in sports. So when I work with different people from all around the world, but especially French people, it's not for the right now. It's only for French people. But you understood that I expand the platform. I noticed that everywhere it's like a central role for lots of people. Because if I don't move my body, even if I'm not an athlete, it's really important, because, as I said before, it will be connect what happens in your brain and what you are doing in your life, for your everyday life. And it's not optional. It's not, I do not like sports, so I won't do it. But you have the right to not like sports, but this is the reality. We are connected to our bodies, and we cannot avoid this precious link and this obvious link.
Absolutely agree. You know, just from an emergency room, I'll tell you, there were so many things that were probably mental health issues that came out as physical symptoms and vice versa. And we have to really recognize that they're all linked together. You know, this also brings up a good point. When we're talking about how do if we want to make sure that children also realize, now that we know this, we want our children to be able to invest in this and know how important this is. So Michael, we were having an interesting conversation. So Michael's a father to a 6-year-old, and he's noticed the differences and the changes while your daughter was involved in sports. Can you tell us a little bit about that? So for anybody who is thinking about putting their children in sports, how important is it and why?
Our mind works up to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I think for putting children in sports, I was a former athlete myself. I played baseball, and I've been playing golf for 20 years. I live in the U.S. now. But for me, when I started putting my daughter in sports, we started with gymnastics when she was in 18 months. And that really gave us a foundation of like athleticism. And then we moved on to soccer, and then to piano and cheerleading. And so I think the intentionality is the way that I have seen her react as she has more control and a more awareness of her own body, and we are active together. And so I'm going on walks or being outside and being active, and she's doing that. And so as we talked a little bit about how the resilience and the determination of playing, when she first started playing soccer, she wasn't that good, and she was getting upset very quickly. And as a 5-year-old girl at the time, now 6, her emotions were just all over the place. But since she has been playing sports, I've been teaching her how to kind of breathe through it and be a lot more aware of how she's feeling and pursuing and doing hard things. And so I think for putting children in sports, I think some people do it just so you have an activity to do. But for me, it was really intentional because I have seen how she has developed a more awareness about her own body, and also like she's able to regulate herself much better because she is involved in sports and she is active. And so I know for myself, I am better mentally when I am active physically. When I have gone to the gym and done the things that I need to make sure that my body is strong, I know that I feel well. And so I don't think that we always think about children that way. We think they just always want to play. But I think that's their body asking for activity, and we have gone to work and we're tired and we don't want to go do those things. But for me, I have just been very intentional about making sure that we have that activity together and exposing her to a lot of different sports and seeing what she's learning. And I think that the determination and perseverance and the resilience of doing the hard things has just completely changed her in the past 2 years. I just look from her first soccer game to her last soccer game. She's like a completely different player in just 1 year, but her athleticism and her activity and like her mental state in the game is kind of what I've been focusing on. And it was just intentional behind the scenes to make sure that I am doing physical activity with her and for her and creating this environment where she is active, but I'm seeing the benefits of how she reacts when something's going on in the house and how she's managing her emotions and the things that we talk about. I've just seen such a positive transformation in her because I was intentional about making sure that she had an awareness of her body, and now that awareness of her mind also exists. So, you know, it's kind of a win-win. And I think parents should just really think about what it is they want their children to learn, because doing sports with children is a commitment, and you are running and going and after work and you've got practices and all these other things. But for me, I just wanted to create just an awareness in her about her body and herself as a human and how she interacts with this world. And as a mental health champion, you know, I think I just want to give her that advantage of just the knowledge of self. And so as she continues to excel physically, then mentally she's also getting the same benefits.
Yeah, that speaks to even adults. You need the same thing, and just setting us those habits that you're looking for. So I'm going to take it back to Ebiye. I wanted to ask, actually, because, you know, we were having an interesting discussion prior, just when we were talking about resilience and also how do you think about it as an individual. And you're talking about how, you know, you're really intentional cognitively about your mental and physical health. And, you know, I'm curious, do you see a difference when you're doing it individual? And then you also play a team sport. What's it like in those different avenues? Because I imagine it's not the same. And how do you navigate that? Because, you know, you're also a unit, you're also an individual. What is that like?
I had mentioned earlier that above anything else, I'm grateful to be an athlete because it has taught me how to navigate life for even when I retire. And one of the things that I would put at the forefront of that as somebody who plays a team sport is over the course of a career, your older teammates will retire, you'll have younger teammates who come into the game. It's always a different puzzle to figure out, both on the court and in the locker room. Makes it stimulating, but at the same time, if your self-worth is linked in external things, and this is true outside of the avenue of competition, but the more that your innate worth is linked to things that aren't 100% within your control, the more difficult the mental game becomes as far as keeping things stable. And as someone who plays a team sport, I can individually play well and my team can lose. I can have a perfect game, individually speaking. I can have a terrible game or a game in which I'm a non-contributor to my team, and the team can still win. And understanding that, you want to be even-keeled on both sides of the coin. Because if you have a false sense of who you are and what you're contributing, because you happen to be on a really good team relative to your competition, and you slack off, you don't train as well, it's like, hey, our team's winning, you'll find yourself out of a job pretty soon. On the other side of that coin, you could individually be making progress. You could be engaging in good habits. You could be growing in your game and in your craft, and your individual performances could be improving. You may just not have the right pieces around you at a given period of time relative to who you're competing with, and so your external results may not necessarily match up with your individual growth. And there's so much in life that you can learn from that. Over time, the one thing you always want to do is sit down and say, am I better today than I was yesterday? And that's 100% within your control. Maybe you didn't make as many shots as you wanted. Maybe the external results didn't match up on that day. But over time, you'll find that the more individual days you win, the further along you're going to be. And you may find a way to hack a couple wins despite you not necessarily engaging in the best habits. Because circumstantially, some things may fall in a certain way. But I'd say the big thing I've learned as an individual in a team sport is, as great as an interactive dynamic is over the course of your career, you have to find a way to embrace an internal locus of control and find a way to look at your growth individually, independent of external things. If you can grow individually, you'll find that you'll always be in the game. If you're always looking at, did my team win? Did our team not win? Do I like? The more you look at things outside of yourself, the more circumstantial your life and your mental health becomes. And figuring out that process of dealing with cooperative dynamics, but always looking and always starting and finishing with the man in the mirror, the person in the mirror, as far as how you evaluate your sense of self. That's been I say arguably the most important thing for me mentally throughout my career. Because playing a team sport is a different dynamic versus if you're in an individual sport, in the sense of when you're in an individual sport, if you win or lose, it's on you. There's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to run. In a team sport, figuring out how to judge your individual performance. Am I executing the coach's game plan? What is my personal, we call it reward to failure ratio? How many constructive plays am I making, whether that's scoring, whether that's assisting a teammate? How many plays in a game am I positively contributing to our team versus how many negative? And those are the things that are a little bit more on you as an athlete. So you're not necessarily looking at, did the team win and did the team lose, and having that be what determines your emotional state. Because I was a kid when I was your daughter's age. You did not want to be around me if I lost anything. Anything. Especially in a sport. I was crying, I was throwing tantrums. I was, for all intents and purposes, a brat if I lost something at a young age. And I could have individually played well, but if the team lost, you did not want to be around me. And part of growing up and maturing is figuring out, okay, you always have to get better. That's how you keep a job. If you get complacent, people will outperform you and you'll lose your job. But how do I continue to get better and not put my self-worth in things outside of myself, particularly if those things aren't going well? And you have those two things, you manage a career over time in an even-keeled way, and you continue to make improvements, but you don't take failures personally.
You were talking about being in a team sport, and I played golf, which was more of an individual sport. But I think that when you began to say about the things inside of your control, my dad used to tell me something about you're not playing against the guy next to you, you're playing against the golf course. And as an individual game, and as I have learned the game of life, It has just taught me about I'm not playing against whatever circumstances or whatever hazards or whatever obstacles may be in my way. I'm playing against myself. And so I just wanted to piggyback on the thought, what you were saying about how I've got to keep that attention inside, right? And I think that's kind of the thing that we're doing with Blemishes, making sure that we're holding a mirror so you can see yourself. But then in the team aspect, when you talked about, I could play bad and my team could win. That's the important thing about community. And that's the important thing about a group of people here, having a community of people that, hey, somebody else can pick you up if you're down, or if you made a bad play, somebody else just has your back. And I think that's where, this type of environment is so important, because you can actually connect with a community of people. If someone's having a bad day, there is help out there for you. And I think that while we're having this conversation around mental health, is to know that we're not alone in this endeavor of life. And so many other people are going through very similar things. But as an individual, if we keep our focus on ourselves and making sure, not the things that we can't control, but also connecting with a community in a team sport or something, that will really help us continue.
Yeah, connection makes a really big difference in people's mental health and the epidemic of burnout. So we're almost done with this panel, so I wanted to see if we could take one question from the audience, if someone has a question for any of our panelists.
Thank you. It's a question about mental images, because this is always the main topic of my work as a researcher at Sorbonne University and also as a journalist. So imagination can be really a very important aspect to improve this heart of to be besides athletes. And so it's just to say, what is your point of view about this question, about this powerful capacity of imagination to change things and to allow to athletes to really open their horizons. Thank you.
Do you want to take that this week? I'll take it. Okay. Yep, I'll take it.
I'll say half of what I do as an athlete is visualize. One, because as you get older, you realize you can only physically do so much in a day. At most, it'll be 3 training sessions in a day, but normally 2, even if those are a couple hours each. At the max, it's probably 6 hours, and not always, but at max, it's 6 hours I'm physically doing something towards my work. And you realize that trying to push that number, you hit a point of diminishing returns as far as how much recovery time you need before you can have another active training session. And so if you think of a typical 8-hour workday, and athletes tend to like to overachieve. So if you're like, okay, I've got to put 10 hours into my craft as a handball player, and I'm physically putting in 4 hours. We have 2 2-hour practices. Where do I get another 6 hours in of my day? And that's where visualization comes in. You're watching footage of yourself, your opponents, your teammates. There's a whole mental game that is associated with what you visually see, gaining information from that, and trying to project a greater reality. After every training session I have, because at least on my national team, we record every practice. And so my practice is get there, train, cool down. As we're cooling down, video assistant airdrops to all of us our practice footage. I get home, as I'm winding from the day, I watch back every rep of practice. And sometimes it's a 10-minute process. It's like, okay, this is pretty straightforward. But as you're watching and you're visualizing, you're seeing what's working well, what's not working well, individually, in concert with your teammates. Now, smartphones, which we didn't have at the start of my international career, it's very simple to take a clip, transpose, edit it, send it to a teammate. It's like, hey, in this situation, we're struggling to get this, but here's an example of what looks really good. And then that teammate can watch it over and over and over again and have the image of what success in our field that we're striving for looks like. And that's, I would say, half of what I do is if I can't innately visualize what it is that's going to make us successful, if I'm trying to figure out how to break down an opposing defense and I just can't think of the answer, I'll search out visually what the answer is. Maybe another team, another player. Team sport at the highest level is a copycat endeavor, and that's for any sport. You can't really keep secrets for too long because everything's on film. And if you do something that's good, everybody's going to want to copy you. Right? And that's probably half of what I do as an athlete is just visualize, is look at tape, whether it's of myself, of other people, opponents, other prominent players, not just within my sport, but in other sports, people who can inspire me. That's a big part of what I'm a champion for, is trying to draw inspiration from as many different sources as you can. And it can be a move that a basketball player does. It can be a soccer tactic that translates to handball. I happen to play a sport that's a bit of an amalgam. It's a bit of an intersection of a spectrum of other sports. So there are a number of elements from a whole host of fields, athletic and non-athletic, that I can bring back into my handball game. And figuring out how to do that requires visualization. Going into my next training session, you want to be cognizant to have something that you're conscious of working on. And before you even do a rep, you visualize it. If you don't score a goal, it's like, okay, you didn't score a goal, but can you visualize what success would look like in the rep that you did? And the more you make a habit of constantly trying to visualize what success is in your field, it makes it a lot easier to figure out whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that mental rehearsal over time just becomes a habit. Before I take a shot, just visualize a couple different iterations of me succeeding. And then going into that shot, I'm also significantly more positive. I hope that thoroughly answers your question. I think it was a really insightful one, particularly for myself, because as I said, visualization is about half of what I do from a time perspective as a handball player.
Okay, I got 1 minute. Yes, I just wanted to add something because, in my opinion, I think it depends also a lot of personalities of athletes. The other day, I just saw the documentary on Netflix about Simone Biles, and I think it's the perfect example of just what you said minutes ago about how this kind of rare personality can change a whole world in sports, and not only in gymnastics. For everybody, I think, in sports, because she had the courage to visualize something different, not just for her, but for her team and for her sports, and for lots of different athletes in different domains. So I think it depends on that. And after we got different patterns in psychology. And I think if you want to visualize something different to change your way of thinking or your way of feeling also, because I think sports, it's also about feelings, what you feel about yourself when you do that, what you feel about yourself when you stop doing sports, and what you create of yourself, of your own visualization. So I know that I only got 1 minute, but if you want to dig this subject, maybe go to psychology patterns.
We could obviously talk all evening, but we have a bunch of great speakers coming. So I want to thank our panel. Thank you so much.